stage this afternoon. As the great educator that he is, he's going to be directing these wonderful guys. Eric Jones on the keyboards. He is also a recent member of the Savannah Jazz Hall of Fame. Mark Chesnow on bass. And we have Mr. Robert Saunders on drums, and they're going to help us using Duke Ellington's The A Train. They're going to help us make sense of jazz. Welcome, Randall Reese and the rest.
Yeah, people get dragged to a concert, and the band will start out, and there's a tune they recognize, or at least one that sounds pretty good to them, and they're thinking, yeah, that's nice. And then they get to the end of the tune, and for 10 minutes, they all go, have no idea what's going on. And then suddenly the tune reappears, you're sort of baffled. And so we're here to kind of explain a little bit of what all that doobie-doobie-doo stuff is going on in the middle. And I think one of the things to think about is intent. When you go to any musical performance, what is the intent of the performing group? And if you certainly go to see somebody, Elton John or somebody, it's very much about entertainment and showmanship and musicianship. But it's very audience directed. On the other hand, some of you may have seen videos of Miles Davis or something, kind of standing back in the corner and occasionally and even in classical music, when you go to a Pops concert, it's about engaging the audience in a different way than if you're doing Mahler or Beethoven or something. And jazz is sort of a self-indulgent form of music in a lot of ways, because it's about musicians, for the most part, doing what they want to do, and they're perfectly happy to have you listen and like it even more if you leave some money while you're doing it. And different performers will have different combinations of that. Certainly one of the people that Miles Davis had worked with, Dizzy Gillespie, had a completely different kind of personality and was always clowning. If any of you were at the Savannah Jazz concert last week with Joe Granston, a wonderful musician, Jeff Hayden on piano. Joe is a superb musician, but he's also very much about entertaining the audience. Anyway, we're going to try and take you a little bit into the band and the way that we think things. And we're going to start with a very well-known tune, associated with Duke Ellington. It was actually written by Billy Strayhorn, who was his collaborator on many things. And tune's called Take the A Train. And then we'll talk a little bit about what we're doing and how we're thinking about this tune. And we're going to do a pretty straightforward, sort of standard, generic approach to it here. Okay. Thank you. So, we're of course interested a lot in improvisation. And improvisation has been a part of music, obviously, since the very beginning, since the first pieces were improvised. Can't write them down until you figure them out. But there have always been great improvisers, even within the classical tradition. Certainly J.S. Bach was a master at improvising. But I'm not sure whether this is correlation or causation, but as we went more towards concert settings, we also tended to put a little less emphasis on improvisation. Also, as groups got bigger, it becomes rather unwieldy. It's kind of hard to have a 70-piece improvisatory ensemble. I mean, you can sort of see the limitations there. And so in the classical world, it's kind of fallen out of, or had fallen out of favor. It's had a resurgence. And my training was classical. And I basically had the music in front of me for everything. I don't think I could improvise my way through Happy Birthday. And improvising is really fun. It's nice to be able to take those chances to try something out. It also frees you from the tyranny of perfection, because generally it's not going to happen. You know, you're going to miss things, you're going to have things that don't go quite the way you want, you're going to have inspired moments, and you're going to have days where you wonder what you're thinking or whether you're thinking at all. But it's a very different experience, and I still enjoy it whenever I get a chance to play in a classical situation, which as a saxophone player is somewhat limited. I've done a lot of boleros over the years, and I enjoy it. It's a very different experience. So. And interesting, for me, it's now more stressful, probably, trying to achieve that perfection and accuracy. But for most of the players in the orchestra, it would Hello. Okay. We're back. You know, for most of the orchestra players, it would feel kind of exactly the opposite. You're used to having that everything set and planned. Not sure what's happening. So, I'll check. Could be. Anyway, How long do I need to talk? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so while we're improvising, we need to have some way of knowing where we are. And so something where we can have sort of a marker while we're improvising. And I'd like Robert to talk a little bit about that. And it's a deliberate choice because a lot of people think the drummer just sits back there and goes, ding, ding. And it's quite the opposite.
Very, very quite so. Well, hi guys, I'm Robert. Well, like he said, this particular tune follows a particular form. Basically, a roadmap kind of helps keep everybody aligned. Even if sometimes, most times, if you don't even know how to read the music, if you can hear and you know the roadmap, you can follow along. The form of this song was one of the first ones that was taught to me when I was coming up. It's a form called AABA. Say it back to me. AABA. Okay, so what that means is the first thing that you hear, that's the first A. That same phrase is then repeated again a second time, that's the second A. And then there's a slight change, a slight deviation. It goes someplace else, that should be. That's usually when you hear James Brown say, can I take it to the bridge? That's usually what he's talking about. He's talking about taking it to a B. But then after that, it goes right back to the end and it rounds out with an A. So if we could just slowly kind of go through it real quick. Show you what I'm talking about. It's real simple.
Just right on.
First A. First A. 1, 2, 1, 2. So that's your first A. That's your first A. So then we're going to play the A one more time. But then there'll be a slight change. You'll hear it. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. That right there is it's the audible indicator. Something else is getting ready to happen. It leads you right down to the bridge. Right to the bridge. 1, 2, 1, 2. Then, right back to the A, right back to the top. 1, 2. So with that is the form of the song. That's the whole entire song. So then the cool thing that happens is that whole 10-minute jam period that he was talking about in the intro, that's everybody basically improvising over that roadmap. So usually what's going on is somebody's out there, they're speaking their mind, they're speaking their ideals and everything. While we're holding it down, or whoever's not playing solo, we're holding it down and we are laying the groundwork of that map chords. Huh? Oh, okay, I heard somebody. I'm so sorry.
He hears voices a lot.
But yes, but that's usually what's going on up here. We're all following the roadmap, best of our abilities. Sometimes it could be as simple as this. There's definitely some jazz tunes out there that the form is definitely much more tricky. It goes to a C section, a D, even an E. It gets crazy, but that's all in all what the general groundwork of the form is.
Mr. Ross,
Yes.
quick question. So
Yes.
do you pause in between as the others are playing somewhere along the line? Do you take a pause and then come back in and join them?
Yes, yes and no. It just all depends on the feel of the moment. what's really going on. And then I know it's going to probably come back around later, but like he said, you wouldn't think that I would need to know this, but that's the main thing that I need to know. I need to be able to hear and follow along. And what my job is to really do up here is to keep a steady pulse, but to also, as much as he's an indicator of what's coming up, I'm also an indicator of what's coming up. I could sit there and play this tune by myself, and you will hear when the sections are changing. So I show you. Just as much as.
So he's explained a little bit about one very basic form to you. But of course, the big problem for the listener there is the part that you use to identify the form, the melody, has disappeared. So what are we improvising to? Well, you can embellish and improvise on the melody, and that happens a lot, and it certainly happens a lot in a lot of other styles of music. If you stand in a room where you're singing Happy Birthday, you'll hear a lot of different versions of it going on, varying in quality and inspiration. But what we're basically doing along with that form is taking the harmony that's underneath that, and we're building new melodies on top of that harmonic foundation. So we have this formal structure, it's a certain number of beats, measures if you know that terminology, and then there's a harmonic structure that goes with that. So if we can take it one more time from the top, but without me this time, we're not doing the introduction, just right where the melody would be.
I don't know backing track?
Yeah, backing track. 1, 2, 1, 2. Section, the bridge, yeah. So we're creating new melodies on top of that. I was about to go down a rabbit hole. Okay. So, Eric, as the principal chord player here, talk a little bit about your responsibilities, what you're doing. Does your second time through the form sound like your first time through the form, and so on?
Yeah, so my job as the pianist is to provide harmonic support to what's going on with the melody. And I guess Mark and I work in tandem when it comes to that, because we're both supplying the harmony for what's going on with what Randy is doing. And basically, we have a outline, we have a series of harmonies that we have to play in a certain order, but we also can vary that, whether it be something really small variations or maybe large variations. But we want to make sure that the harmony that's provided is supporting what he's doing, because, it kind of paints a color, a picture to the melody. So, let's just play through the A section twice. We'll do an AA section. So I'll play we'll start right on it. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. same thing, but I did vary it a little bit with the rhythm. It's like when I play the chorus, that changed from the first A section to the second A section. But the idea is to make sure that we have the identity of the song intact, you know, as a foundation before we can do some of the other extemporaneous stuff that we can do to it and change it up and all of that. So that's my job as a pianist, provide harmonic support.
So if I'm playing solo, when do you lead, when do you follow, when do you get out of the way? I mean, I know there's not a defined.
I always get out of the way, that's what it is. Well, you know,
I mean, talk about
Yeah.
that a little bit, about the interaction between.
so my way of looking at it is really we're having a conversation. It's organic conversation. You know, if you're a good conversationalist, you listen. So I'm listening to what he's playing, but I'm also reacting. Sometimes I may play something that may, you know, maybe inspire him to play a certain rhythm, you know, maybe because, you know, you're going back and forth in a conversation, you know, and then, you know, we can go down somewhat of a rabbit hole in the conversation, but we also can do that in the music, you know, in terms of what he plays, when he improvises. But beneath all of that, you still have the song, so you're still talking about a certain subject, but you're also talking about different themes within that subject. And so the subject is, you know, take the A train. The music is, the melody is there, that's the subject. But we also talking about it. We're making our own melodies and talking about that particular melody in terms of it, making variations of that melody too. So, yeah.
A lot of it depends on the personality of the people in the group, or how you read the personalities, because many times you're just meeting them. But, like, for instance, they play with a lot of saxophone players who are more aggressive than I am. And, I mean, it just is, you know, they have different approaches. And, so they're likely to push a little more, or play a little more rhythmically aggressive, perhaps busier, whatever. The way I play, they might leave a little more room in there. So it's reacting. It's also remembering who the leader is.
Who's paying? Who's writing the check?
You know, everything else, it comes down to where the money comes from. And as I've told, you know, I think every drummer I've ever had at school, that, and there's somebody out there who's going to be laughing in a moment. It's like, you don't play for other drummers. You play for the saxophone player. You play for the pianist, because those are the people who hire you. Another drummer is never going to hire you. He's the drummer, you know. So, yeah, you're always trying to figure out what the other players are like. I tend to play a lot with older players, and it's easy for me to get into a comfort zone there, and I enjoy playing with Robert because he kicks my butt sometimes, and not too much, but you know, but it's good for me. It makes me think a little bit. So you're trying to find that balance between all the different players. Now let's go to the bass, Mark, and this is going to overlap a lot with what both of these guys are talking about.
Okay. Well, I want to start by saying one thing. So you're seeing us up on stage, and does anybody notice anything different about the way we set up, whereas when you go see most rock and roll bands or any other band set up, do you notice how we might be set up a little different? How are we set up? And what about me and him? Usually when you see a rock band, where's the drummer? In the middle, right? Okay. Well, there's a reason we set up this way, and that's what I'm going to talk about, okay? So my function in the band is I'm literally bridging the gap between what's going on here and what's going on here. So I have to listen to the harmony that's happening, but I'm also providing rhythmic support for Robert too, so it doesn't sound thin. Can you guys just play 8 bars without me? And don't add in. Yeah,
See, you'll start.
Too good. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
right? Yeah.
1, 2, 1, 2.
Got it? See it? Okay, so what I'm adding is, of course, the low-end foundation to what he's playing, and it's giving it a little more, you know, the bottom end, but it's also the rhythmic support. So now let's do it together, and I'm gonna add some rhythm that fits in with what he's playing. And it's my job to listen, and now I'm in a very lucky situation because with these two guys, we've literally played around 1,000 gigs together. And that's not really an exaggeration. So we kind of really know what we're gonna do, and it just becomes very subconscious. But anyway, let's play it. 1, 2, 1, now. So I'm adding a little bit of rhythmic flavor with Robert, trying to catch what he's doing, what's he doing. We playing off of each other. We're listening. He may change the harmony a little bit, and if he changes it a little bit, I gotta listen to what I had. Now I'm playing with piano players, and they'll change the harmony a lot. And then I'm like, whoa, 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 what are you doing here? Because I've never played with you before. I don't know what you're doing, so maybe you need to chill out a little bit. I'm not naming names, but anyway, there are people. Anyway, so that is my job here. So what you heard me play, and maybe you caught this because we were giving it a little difference between the A section and the B section. So in the A section, I played something that kind of sounded like this. Okay? We call that a 2 feel because while we're counting along in 4, you know, it's going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, but I'm going 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Now, of course, I didn't play it like that when we played the tune. I embellished it. I added to it, made it a little more interesting. You don't want to just, if you play it just like that, you're going to sound like you're in a country band. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I play a lot of country music, and I have no problem with it. Work is work, and I love country music. But I'm just saying, okay? So, jazz music gives us, and that's one of the big differences, is we have the ability to be a little more flexible with the rhythm. Now, you may have noticed when we play the bridge, let's play the bridge. Here's the bridge. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? What's the difference? 4. It's like that is what we call a standard, what kind of bass line? Walking bass line. It's walking the bass line. Okay? You know where that came from? I don't really know exactly where the term walking came from, but the first bass player that really is credited with that kind of playing, before that, it was more Dixie and Rag. It was Jimmy Garrison, right? Oh, yeah, Jimmy Blanton, you're right. Wrong. Earlier bass player, Jimmy Blanton, sorry. Anyway, he was Duke's bass player, and so they count him as being the guy that started the whole playing in 4. Because if you listen to the early Dixie stuff, it's more that it was actually a tuba player. And little history, I'll do a quick history lesson real quick. If you listen to the earliest recordings, the Dixie recordings and the earliest jazz, they used tuba. And that's when the recordings were made were strictly mechanical. There was no electricity involved at all in the earliest recordings. The vibrations literally mechanically vibrated the disc, okay? That's why they used a tuba, because that was all that could be heard. When electricity was added and the microphones and whatnot were able to vibrate the disc, there were a little more sensitivity, they were able to switch from tuba to bass. So, short history lesson, anyway. Anyway, but that's the gist of what I'm doing here as a bass player. I'm bridging the gap, I'm playing the harmony, I'm listening to what he's doing, trying to capture his harmony, maybe add a little touch of harmony on itself. I might change a note instead of just playing the root all the time. I might like sit on a different note and add a little color. And then I'm also trying to capture what he's doing and just bridge us all together and make us sound like one unit as a trio. Okay?
If we do the opposite of what you did with the two of them, so with just Mark and I playing,
Okay?
because he's giving me the outline of the chords, and he's also laying down the beat. So
So just the two
what
of us, yeah.
they're doing is essentially enhancing.
And if I'm doing my job right, you should still be able to hear the chords and what's happening with just me and the melody and the saxophone. So.
Oh, 1, 2, 3. And so that was the B section there. It's a lot thinner, obviously, doesn't have the richness of the other one, but functionally,
It can be done.
it covers it, yeah.
Anyway.
I was talking a little bit with Eric about, how adding like more or less energy to it. And so when he's talking about doing the 2 and 4, and there's a lot of other tricks like that you can sort of change the activity level or energy level, but not change the tempo of the piece. And you may or may not change the volume of the piece, the loudness of it, depending on what you want to do. So there's a lot of options in there. Okay, that brings us up to Robert.
Well, so if he's
What is
getting-
it you're doing over there?
I'm doing a lot of things. I'm kind of the mixed bag over here. So what's really happening, if he's giving harmonic support and he's kind of the glue in between, I'm setting pulse, and I'm also listening all the way up. So if me and him are considered like the bottom, I'm listening all the way up to the piano and whoever is playing what we call the top. We're playing the top melody, which either saxophone, piano, or trumpet, or something like that. I'm usually listening all the way up. And it's all happening in real time, split between 4 limbs. So what's happening is, same way Mark has different ways he can vary the feel, I can follow suit with what's happening with my ride cymbal. In jazz, usually the ride cymbal and the bass are linked. That's really where the illusion or the trance of jazz kind of happens, is between the ride cymbal and the bass. So as Mark's does, I can also do 2. Whereas I can play a 2 fill, or I can also walk the bass line 2 with him. And that's usually what you hear on most of your jazz recordings. Still the same tempo, 2 drastically different feels. One is kind of much more light, one's kind of bouncy. The other one's a little bit more deliberate and much more driving. That's all happening with the ride, and lightly behind that is my bass drum. It's adding just extra weight and structural support. This is keeping, in most cases, like if you say you listen to rock music or any type of music that's not jazz for the most part, there's always primarily a strong backbeat on 2 and 4. You usually hear like the Beatles. In jazz, that responsibility is shifted over to the hi-hat. It's a much more lighter sound, it's crisper, it's less volume, and it cuts through. So while this is happening, this is keeping the backbeat, so you can feel it. You can feel it. Whether 2 or 4. In all actuality, I can do that and make the gig. I can do just that and make the gig. But then there's an extra layer. This is where my biggest contribution really comes into, where it's energy and rhythm and syncopation. From my seat, while this is happening, this is where I get to have a conversation with them. This is my contribution. Whereas they can have a conversation, this is how I have a conversation with them. This is how I agitate or either like start something. I can be the start of the rabbit hole. And we go down. I can be the rhythmic start of it. Or by not doing it, I can take away energy and leave it calm. See if you guys can hear the difference. That's calm, right? It's calm. I can take to the nth degree. Tempo didn't change, but the energy shifted. The energy, the volume, everything shifted. So if I were to do that behind them, that might spark Randy to want to go out on a limb and play something he's never played before. Or as before, or if I play it calm, he play calm, cool, collective, be a lot more lyrical, and do certain things like that.
Could I add one thing to that?
Yes.
When he was doing that, the hi-hat foot cymbals were basically at the same volume the whole time he was doing that. His maintenance volume was the same. What was happening was the accents and so on were at different levels. At the beginning, almost everything in the set was under the hi-hat dynamically, but then he's bringing other stuff around it. So that way you have ways of adding energy without just getting louder and louder and louder all the time.
Definitely.
Which is, it's kind of a zero sum there. You can only get so loud.
If I get too loud, I get fired. But also even within that, I can help set up or color different sections. So whereas I could start the tune, I could play all my A's, all the A's of the form, A, B, A. I can play all the A's on this cymbal, which is going to give me a certain sound and a certain texture. But as soon as I switch to B, B is a different feeling. B is a different vibe. I can switch to another cymbal. And that's where if I'm doing my job, you should still be able to hear the tune. Even if I'm just banging, you should still be able to hear the tune. Could we try could we try the form so you can hear what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to-
Yeah, just trio. Yeah. 1, 2, 1, 2.
different, different things, in this case, the form, but also any other things that can be changing. And, you know, in the groups that are most fun to play with, you're gonna have a lot of interaction. And as I said, these guys play together all the time, including tonight at 7 at, good times. Yeah. I'd say you're.
Cynthia.
Cynthia, okay. Now I lost my own train of thought.
We play together a lot.
We played it.
Yeah, but, yeah, so ideally, you know, you're all feeding off each other. Once in a while, I'd get somebody who is sort of a rock in the middle of the stream of life, and it's not much fun. And, you know, I can take like pianists, for instance. When we take, play a basic 3-note chord for me. Okay, now put 7th on it. 9th. So we have these color tones kind of on top of the basic chord. Now, those notes interest me. If you listen to somebody like Miles Davis, he's often playing those sort of extensions, upper notes on top of the basic chord. They coexist with it just fine, they sound great, but it sets up almost like there's 2 key centers or something. However, if Eric's always sitting there and playing the 7th and the 9th on the top, it gives me nowhere to go, because he's already got the good note. and every time I play something that's interesting, it's right there. But if he's burying it down in the voicing, I feel like a 6/9 voice with G on top or something. You know. You can take something like that, it's a little more neutral, and it leaves a lot more room. Chord. So I can play like inside, however you see. But I can also do something like this, which is just layered across the top. I'm playing another, I'm basically thinking of it as a scale based on that chord. So he is a sensitive piano player and leaves room for other people. And that really applies to everybody. I mean, we joke, and there was a rock band in town that used to have a lead bass player. And, he wanted to be a guitarist, and it just, you know, overwhelmed everything. Same can happen with drummers or whatever. So it's finding that way to leave room for other people and encourage them to do things, to set a foundation that's sort of welcoming. Now, in terms of improvisation, so, you know, how do you come up with something from nothing? And I'm not really sure. but what we do is really building on an existing language. It's a lot more like if you were giving an extemporaneous speech. And, you know, you come into school in the fall and they say, you know, stand up and give me 5 minutes on how I spent my summer vacation. And you do that, and it's something you've never done before. I mean, you've never given that exact speech, you haven't written it out, you haven't prepared it, but you're using a language you know, you're using a vocabulary that you know, you may well be building on relationships you know with people in the class, and things like that. So you're reworking an existing language and an existing tradition. And we do the same sort of thing. People are trying to figure out ways to push that language, but you also don't want something that just sounds completely alien to everything else that's going on. So it's you know, you don't have to invent something completely new from whole cloth. You're reworking familiar ideas, and you're trying to find ways to, ideally, to stretch it and ways to keep yourself interested. Because when you play 1,000 jobs together, yeah. So you're sort of repurposing a language that you already have. And when you have a player that has an individual style, a lot of that is how they tend to use those elements, even if they've never played the exact thing before. They may have a particular kind of sound quality. They may be a very busy player. They may be a very sparse player. Again, somebody like Miles Davis, he could play really, really fast when he wanted to. Some of those recordings in the 60s, he's just burning. But he can also just lay a note out there. And you listen to some of those ballads from the 50s, and it's just this distinct sound, bing, that you know in one note that it's Miles. So there are certain things, you know, the kind of sound you get, the way you voice chords. Give me a McCoy Tyner. Yeah, it's a particular kind of sound that gets identified with certain players. Bill Evans is probably another one that has a very identifiable sound. A lot of kind of groove players, Les McCann and those kinds of, Ramsey Lewis, those kinds of things. That lots of gospel and things like that. So you draw on these traditions. A lot of times we'll play around with existing material. I stuck a quote or two in one of my solos in there. I forgot what it was, but whatever it was. We'll stick familiar things in. But you can also take something and sort of reference it without doing it exactly the same. So maybe if we could do the beginning, the intro. This is a standard intro off the Ellington recording. Do it reasonably straight first. Do 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. Now can we do something that sort of paraphrases that refers to it, but it's not exactly the same. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, could you hear what he was changing there? That wasn't hugely. Tell them what you're doing there.
Yeah. So basically, the first time I played that motif, I guess you can call it. But the second time, I did not play those particular notes, but I just played the harmonies beneath that, or maybe the first part of the motif and the last part of that motif. Without doing that rhythm. So, yeah, just a slight variation of it.
So when you change up, does Robert change? Do you change too also?
Yes,
Yeah, I mean,
I can.
yeah, he can.
There's so much I can do.
And I'll be honest, it really depends on the mood and just the synergy. I mean, a lot of times these things are not we don't think this stuff out before we do it. We just do it. But it's really for me, I think it's more of it's a mood. It's like how am I feeling emotionally when I play? Because we're conveying certain emotions to the audience, so it may come out in what I'm doing too as well. So,
Yeah. I mean, I sometimes kind of have, sort of, I think of them as bossa nova nights. Where I like to sort of the breathy sound and just kind of lay it out there and very relaxed and stuff. And particularly if I'm playing with like Bruce, Bradley, guitar player.
Right.
That kind of thing is just beautiful. And then there's other nights, and particularly when I was still working my day job, and sometimes you'd hit Friday night, and
Blow some steam.
you were done, yeah. And instead of just saying I'm too tired to play, it usually went the opposite.
Yeah.
The opposite way. I remember hearing Jody at Phoenix Rancho Alegre, and he was just burning through everything. We took breakfast. Said, "You have a rough week?" He said, "Yeah." So we bring something different to it all the time. Drum solos. Tell us about drum solos. if you remember the drum solo he took during the first one, it was integrated into the
It's integrated in the tune. This particular tune, the integrated drum solo, is what we like to call jazz trading. And it's usually trading means like however many measures is agreed upon. Whoever is calling, they put those measures out there. I respond in those same number of measures. It's a whole isolated conversation that's happening. So, and this tune is technically trading fours. It's technically trading fours in this tune.
except in the bridge.
Except for the bridge. On this one, it's trading fours for each of the eights. On the bridge, they let the drums just go. So for that number, for those 8 measures of the bridge, it's just me. And I had to make up something that fits in those 8 measures that, number one, doesn't blast you guys over the heads, but number 2 is something that's intelligible for them to realize when to come back in. There have definitely been times I've been definitely guilty of this. When I was learning how to play jazz. You go and you play everything you know in those 8 measures. Every single thing you got in your wheelhouse, you do it, and then you hit the downbeat, and the band's just looking at you like, yeah. But that's usually what's going on with drum solos, and usually, even if it does sound like the drummer's beating, I trust you. Trust me, he's actually, to the best visibility, playing to the form, going all the way back to the beginning. He's following the roadmap and trying to mark out stops along the map of, all right, here I am in the A, here I am in the next A, here I am in the B, and here I am in the last A. So if I'm doing my job correct, again, you should still be able to sing along while I'm doing a drum solo. That melody, the melody should always stay intact, whatever's going on. Even when we're improvising, you should still be able to sing the melody against what we're doing. So do you want to try? Yeah. You want to put me in
Okay,
shit?
how do you want to do it?
I was going to say, do you want to play? You want to play it down and then take the drum solos, or do you want to just come in? Probably need to just play the tunes.
Okay,
Yeah.
Do you want to play A training again, or play something different?
do we want to play A Train again, or we want to play something different? Different.
Okay.
Well, we'll play something else with the same basic form, since that's the form we've talked about. Maybe Alone Together?
A.
Yeah. Alone Together. Yeah, this tune has a little sort of lump in it because we were talking about the phrases tend to all be the same length. In this one, the A section has, there's sort of 2 different versions of it, whatever, but it's easy to hear the melody. Alone Together, short. Remember who wrote it?
Yeah, I think it's.
Yeah, okay. How long?